Just wondering if that's something that, if you see, or what that type of mind shift is for you, like, and if that's abrupt, if that's healthy, if you feel like that fuels your personal practice or detracts from it, having to, be less dynamic or to work on that back end in a that feels like a different way to be.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, because lately I was talking to a friend about like how when you're like an arts administrator, sometimes a lot of your creative energy is kind of spent by helping others with their projects. So then, I don't know, sometimes you have to find a way to keep some for yourself too, and you have to give all of your energy away. So that's kind of like the little bit of the mind shift I'm having right now. What I'm exploring is like, how do I preserve a little bit for myself, but then also continue to help others as I'm like, growing, and I like to grow alongside people too. So it's kind of tricky. It's a tricky balance.
Speaking of that balance, do you feel like, when you said growing alongside people, right? Do you feel like there are barriers or obstacles to growing alongside people when you're also in a role that is, kind of a, I don't want to say necessarily a gatekeeper, but you hold some power within those structures of curation and accepting things in or shaping things. Is that a difficult thing to do as a person who's both an artist and wants to be alongside people, not just kind of over them in the traditional sense of what that looks like and feels like?
Yeah, I think, being an artist, you kind of are a natural born collaborator. So kind of seeing other people's ideas and seeing what they're interested in and kind of going with the flow that they're proposing sometimes helps. I think the only time when I have to be like the overarching, like, this is the boundary, is if somebody's like maybe misbehaving, which rarely ever happens. So like, so yeah, I mean, growing alongside people, I'm also learning lessons, and sometimes I learn from artists, like learning about their practices. Maybe there's a branch of art history that I haven't really been interested in studying until I, came across this person's work, and then I have to like go back and find the context in order to write about their practice. So it's just all very informative. So, you kind of continue to grow, and I think that's kind of a fun job, is when you get to continue to learn how to do things.
I love that. It seems like that's something that I've seen and experienced, is that those traditional hierarchies are no longer as important or essential in those fields. Have you, whether for good or bad, learning lessons from it, have you ever been in that difficult situation or have been part of that kind of former method of gatekeeping, either as an artist or kind of been pressured into that as a curator?
Not so much in curatorial, thank God. Like, I haven't had a lot of experiences with people gatekeeping information. I mean, that could be, that could be yet to come, but I hope not.
Knock on wood.
Knock on, no, I don't want to knock on this. But I think sometimes, like, some artists like to keep information to themselves that, that could be useful for others, like hanging on to opportunities and things. So that's definitely a real gatekeeping thing, or one of many ways you can gatekeep. But I don't know. I have a really great support system, and like, I have friends that support me and I support them, and we usually share opportunities that we think that match their practice. So like, that's kind of a way to break down that barrier, or that, or resist the urge to keep something to yourself because you think it's like scarce. But when it's not true, there's always opportunities coming around 24/7. It's abundant.
I love that. We were just talking about that earlier with some of our other trainings that we were doing with artist work in education. That idea that just because something doesn't work out doesn't mean that it's not, that they're not ready or good or whatnot. It just is kind of finding that fit. And that's something I advise young people on with art all the time. Like, there's so many different styles, so many different approaches. It's kind of just about finding your audience, finding your people, and making that a motivator to keep yourself going and sustained.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
When it comes to those opportunities, right? From your experience, I'm guessing you came to art first, correct? Where did curation come in for you, or where did you see that as a path that you wanted to pursue and that felt like a good fit?
Yeah, I kind of discovered it while I was an undergrad, so it wasn't my intention. Like, I had a bunch of different, like, when you're in school in undergrad. You're kind of taking a bunch of different weird curvy paths and like where you think you might go, but it's kind of a mess over here. So I'm gonna switch over here. But but I think what I found was that I was enjoying a lot of like the liberal arts stuff, so art history, and I kind of enjoyed humanities too, like the writing aspects. And I just kind of started trying to figure out like where can I apply those skills. So I started like interning in museums and stuff, and I did a little bit in conservation. That was okay, maybe a little too many rules. And then the conservator that I was working under, I asked her like, what's one thing you regret about this job? And she says she thought that she didn't have a direct impact on the world or people like outside of the museum. And technically that's not true, because like you're literally saving art objects so they can last for the next 100, 200 years. But then I can see that isolation of being in a lab all day with not interacting with the general public like whatsoever. So once I heard that, I realized like, oh yeah, no, I want to interact with people. I want to build relationships like directly. Like I want that to be part of the kind of the everyday. So yeah, from there I just kind of ran into curatorial and then and run into it, but like I just kind of took paths that kind of led me to it through like managing collections and stuff. So no, it's been kind of a fun ride thus far.
That's a really profound moment to have with somebody and then to learn from and share from. But I think it speaks to that the depth in which that person maybe committed themselves before kind of seeing what else was out there or taking that broader view. So thank you for sharing that. For anyone out there who's interested in conservation, that's something to consider.
Conservation's great.
I know like 500 people right now who are like, that's what I want. Like put me down there. I don't want to talk to people. That's cool too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So where this kind of line of questioning was going to too is I feel like there's a lot of artists who try curation or who aspire to be curation, or to some degree just take it as a given that like, well, I'm an artist, I can curate.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that's true, that every artist can be a curator or can curate? And what makes a good artist / curator?
Yeah, great question. I think I'm still figuring that out for myself. So I think so far from what I've collected in my research is that I think artists can curate. I think that's a real thing, but it's a skill. Like you have to hone it. And then also you can put things on the wall, but then how do you like make the connections between each object? And like even what we were talking about earlier with my painting being kind of ovular, that's a word, and then like these are kind of making an oval, and then there's also like the responding to like the landscape, and this is kind of a landscape, like that's kind of like curatorial. We're curating the space and the paintings in context, and like it's just kind of there's so many opportunities to tell a story with like what's here in the space. So I mean there's like a lot of that, but then also if you're somebody that's heady, maybe you'll do more research, academic research and stuff. But yeah, I think it's like a skill that takes many different there's a lot of facets that you have to harness in order to make it work. But I think anybody can do it generally. I mean, if you want to put stuff up in your apartment, that's cool. I've never gotten to do that, but I've like lent my work to friends to have up in their basements and stuff. So no, I think it's all legit.
Excellent. I kind of want to ask this question. I feel a little like devilish asking it because it's maybe a little shade throwing, but without naming names, have you felt like your personal work as an artist was ever curated in a way that you didn't agree with, or you felt like they missed the mark in terms of placing it in that context or placing it in the position of a story that they were trying to tell with a collection of works?
Ooh, yes, actually recently, because it's not in Milwaukee. It's fine. I'm not going to name where and what the location was.
Sure.
But essentially last year, my work was invited to be in a show. I'll just say it's in Chicago. It was in Chicago.
It's a big city. There's a lot of
there's a lot of spaces there. But my work was selected to be a part of like this exhibition. It was an invitation. I didn't apply. I didn't know who these people were, but I went ahead and did it because I saw the artist roster and it had a bunch of like big name artists on there. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. And I think they were just going to put all our work inside of a warehouse situation. And I sent one of my paintings down that they selected because it was kind of like a socially like political, like I'm trying to be very discreet organization. So the context was like politics. And I sent a painting down and then I received images of the work installed, and they put my painting next to another painting that's talking about like emancipation and like slavery. And the painting I set down had the image of a chain in it, but that wasn't the context of what I was painting the work in. So they went ahead and just told their own story about like, I'm Black and there's a chain. So therefore this means that this can connect to this piece, that means slavery. And I've never put that picture on the internet. I was just disappointed. Like, it was kind of heartbreaking. So it just says to me, like, they were in over their heads with, like, providing like the writing and like listening to what I said about the work. Like, they were looking at the patterns in the work, but they weren't considering like the actual background of the artist. So yeah.
I wanted to ask you too, and I think this is a great segue about some of the symbolism in your work. And I think that's really powerful and important to consider. That the way I frame it too is, we all exist within multiple cultures, but at the very core, we have our own kind of self-contained culture in some ways. And as artists, I feel like we're producing culture, contributing to culture, but also maybe on that cutting edge of it.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not trying to self-aggrandize in terms of myself as an artist or any artists out there, but the things that artists do become the trends, become the traditions, become, the movements, right? So having said that, you have a very personal set of symbols that you work with that visually are consistent across your work.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to take offense to this, but I was also a little surprised with how generous you were with describing some of those symbols, right?
Yeah.
So your work doesn't seem to want to be enigmatic in a lot of ways. Let me rephrase that. It could be more enigmatic, right?
Sure, yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about why that is? Why are you creating these symbols that have more maybe personal meaning than universal meaning or general cultural meaning to most people? And I think that chain's a good example, right? To certain people, that means certain things. To you, it means something different, right? So what's the impetus behind that? Why are you creating these symbolic pieces and then kind of demystifying the symbolism for people in some ways?
Yeah. Well, I think it stems from me starting off in like specific like abstraction. And this was like back when I was an undergrad. So I was making paintings that were abstract, but I was always afraid of like talking about what things actually meant. And I kept beating around the bush. And one way I would hide behind it is through like symbols, but they didn't really mean anything. So like, you just sling stuff around arbitrarily and everyone's like, what are you talking about? And you get cooked a couple of times and you kind of have a self-reflection, like, okay, I need to kind of get my story straight. So it's a little bit of that, but then also like telling people what they mean kind of provide, I kind of give myself some power. So like I'm setting the boundary of like, this is what this means. You don't need to assume, but people are going to make up whatever they want to make up, no matter what happens, no matter what you have out in the world. But I think I also put a lot of emphasis on like, democratizing like language. Like I don't want language to be a barrier. Like I want people to have access to at least to what I think my work is about. And not a fan of like super like jargony language either. So like I try to explain what all the symbols mean. And it also provides me with like a library of how to describe like a feeling or a narrative that I want to describe in like a painting. So things are kind of more clear. So it's like a way for me to hold myself accountable for telling a clear story while also being maybe a little cryptic here and there.
I thank you for that. And I love that because it is really easy to kind of BS your way through making things. But also I like that idea too, that you're using it as like a personal guidepost or kind of stepping stone to the next things or within that library. And then again, without naming names, do you feel like there are any of those personal things that you put in there symbolically that you aren't ready to yet share or maybe never will share, or that still holds some of that personal power for you or magic or what have you?
Interesting. Maybe I'm thinking through it. Like, is there something that I'm afraid to talk about in the paintings? And there is, because my work is very much so like a personal narrative. And then there is narratives that I want to share with folks, but then it's like, okay, I don't want to put everybody's business out in the world, like just like my own, like it becomes more like I can easily go into like the familial context of my work. And I'm not comfortable with like talking about my family in public. So like, it's something that will come up and maybe in private conversations with friends while talking about the work, but not necessarily like to the general public. At least I'm not there at that time. But, there's more avenues that are more personal. I'm just not ready to like bring them forth. And that's kind of weird, having to set a boundary with your own sanity of like, well, how much do you want people to know about the work in order to like understand it? So yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, like a teeter-totter, like a balance.
Sure. I mean, I think that's can be extrapolated out to just in general, like how much do you want to let people into your family business or personal?
Yeah,
like,
literally. And like, why do they feel entitled to it? So like, or why do I feel like they should be entitled to it? Yeah, it's real.
Well, and that's what I appreciated. Like I say, I wasn't quite expecting to see some of the breakdown of like what the things meant to you, and not saying that you're like spelling it out for people. But I feel like the trend in a lot of art is for, the curator to write about it, or someone may be more than happy for someone to read multiple things, even if it's not in alignment with your personal vision or values, because it gets you an opportunity or something like that. So it's, I feel like it's a little bit of an educator standpoint in yourself to share that, but also, again, you're connecting with people, still leaving it open, but still setting boundaries. So I think that's an important lesson for people to learn. Thank you for sharing.
No, totally. Interpretation rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe not too much.
Yeah.
So speaking of family, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Ooh, I mean, oh boy. I think at some points I wanted to be a fashion designer. I would draw clothes while I was in school. I had like an entire binder with all my designs. They weren't great, but I'd take it to school and show everybody. And I think that, and then I remember I used to say when I was in high school, like my backup plan would either be like a botanist, like go into botany and like study plants, because I draw plants, so I like looking at them. And then the other one was just become like a massage therapist and then just kind of hang out on cruises. That was like the backup final like midlife crisis plan if nothing worked out. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was all over the place.
So not like a chef on a cruise ship.
No,
Okay.
no chef. Because you get access to like the materials, the spas and stuff. So I'm like trying to think like, okay, how can this benefit me
Sure.
while I'm also helping other people? So like helping something was the theme, but
And then-
either a plant or a person.
Okay. And then what about, I'm sorry, this might be a tangent, but like, what
Yeah.
about the cruise ship? Like, why on a ship, not on a, in a resort on an island? Like the journey, like why the seasickness? Like,
Right,
why
why
go
am
through
I
the time
choosing
zone
violence?
change, everything?
Yeah. I think because I've always had a desire to travel, so I thought that was also a cheat code to like get what I want. But then at like I get paid to go. At
Sure.
least that's how I think cruises work. I don't know.
Okay. I'm
But-
seeing that connection then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, I had a scheme.
I love it. The other question is, generally we've been featuring people who are very Milwaukee centric, right? And you, I feel like, have definitely made yourself at home here and within the institutions and the art world and such. But you didn't start out here, right? So like, what brought you to Milwaukee? Why did that cruise ship, set sail and you docked here?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. So it's a city on the border of Ohio and Kentucky. It's on the Ohio River. And I came up to Milwaukee to study at MyEd. So yeah, I got a scholarship and I came up here. So that's how I got here, really. And I actually didn't visit the campus or anything.
As a former MyEd admissions counselor, I'm like, oh man, that spells trouble.
Yeah.
You got to see the place. Okay.
Yeah, nope.
Follow-up questions coming.
Okay, yep, please, because I was a textbook case of like, let's just wing it, and then showed up, and it just happened to work out when I got here.
I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, but yeah, that's how I got here, and I've been here ever since.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name names because I don't remember them either, but I had somebody drive up from a very long way away for dorm move-in and left for home the same day.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they were not ready for the transition.
Oh.
But those follow-up questions, like what were your first impressions, right? So lifelong Milwaukee area person myself, like I know you weren't coming from, a different time zone. I think.
I was. It was like an hour ahead.
Okay, all right. So
Eastern
you a little
time.
bit of time zone, maybe not a different climate per se, but when you came to the city, what were your first impressions?
My first impressions is that me and my family realized that the air was a lot cooler, so that was different getting out of the car. And I remember we parked like on Wisconsin Avenue because we were trying to figure out where the school was. So my dad pulled over in like the minivan and we were like, what's going on? And we looked down the street, we see this big orange thing at the end of the road. And yeah, that we saw the sculpture and we were like, what is that? So we were just kind of trying to find like markers of like existence, trying to figure out where we were. But otherwise, I found it kind of comparable to Cincinnati. I like how the city here is like pushed up against a lake, whereas like down there, it's more of like a circular thing because the highway goes around the entire city. But here, it's like you go straight and you just get off because like you can't go over the lake. And then I thought the lake was an ocean. I couldn't believe that it was so large because I was maybe the second time in my life that I've seen like a lake, but this is the first time I've seen like sunsets or a sunrise. Or
Oh,
anything like
sure.
that. So that was a lot different. But yeah, definitely the temperature was a lot cooler. That was the first thing I noticed.
Well, one of the questions I had, you discuss your work in the context of cusps. So, the idea of a cusp between two states, where you grew up in, two kind of like geographical, again, like a lot of definitions are based on lines on a map versus,
Yeah.
actual experience, geographical regions of the United States. And then you talk a little bit too about that cusp between like urban and rural, or like different kind of like ways of human existence in the natural environment, but also like night and day, things like that.
Yeah.
When you came here, what were the cusps that you saw geographically? I mean, sociologically, like, did you feel that same interplay on transition or cusp or boundary that you did back home?
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, definitely the lake. I thought that was insane that the sky and the water met. Like, that was freaky to me because I've never seen it. Because if you grew up in like a river valley, like all you see is the sun goes, back behind the hills and that's it. So that was an interesting cups I've never really experienced before. So I treasure that first time I've ever seen that. And I guess other cusp is like, I think of immediately like the environment, like I think of outdoors. I don't really think too much like socially about like, individuals that I meet. Definitely like I was very abrasive when I first got here because I didn't realize everyone was so friendly and saying hi. So that was an odd cusp that I had to adjust to. But mostly it was just environmental.
That's interesting too, because I feel like, again, I don't think I've been to Cincinnati. I've been in that area though, but just hearing that there's such a difference in like kind of how you have to carry yourself or how you present. Do you feel like any of that nature, any of that environment changed your work at all? Or do you feel like you're tapping more into those concepts of cusp from your earlier upbringing background of home?
Yeah, I think I'm pulling it more from the past, at least as of lately, because I think sometimes I over romanticize what things looked like before, but then I go back down there. I'm like, oh no, I'm telling the truth from my memory. Like my memory isn't incorrect. So I think sometimes I gaslight myself on like what I remember down there. But yeah, the work has been really a lot about these cusps and then kind of morphing all these different landscapes together to tell like a news story or make my own home in a way, like through the paintings, like a space that I feel comfortable with being vulnerable. I think that's kind of the goal of like at least like the environments around the subject matter.
And a question about the format of your work, right? So we've got an image here that's, stretched canvas. A lot of your work doesn't exist on a stretched canvas, and in somewhat of a degree, or at least from what I've seen from, the canvas being nailed directly to the wall, or banner format. I don't know if you have a way you'd call those, but what's that about? Where's the decision making to start a piece like on stretched canvas or not, or whether it's going to be on a banner or not, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So at first it kind of began as a way to kind of resist like European standards of like painting or like systems of painting, which is like something very stretched and formal and very clean and crisp. And I also like the naturalness of like just the fiber of the canvas just being loose. It does sometimes, however, like, it's a natural material or like it comes from natural material. So it like bends and warps with like the air and like whatever it's kind of resting against, kind of like paper.
Sure.
But I like the way how it feels organic and it feels like kind of like it could continue on for longer. It doesn't just end at like a sharp, like linear edge. So it feels a lot more immersive in my mind, at least, because like the edges become a part of the painting, which I know, painting has always been like that. The edges are always a part of the painting, whether or not you touch them or not. But I think I have a lot more agency over the edges when they're unstretched. I can cut them and trim them in any way I want.
Do you consider the edge of the canvas composition as like a sort of boundary, like a conceptual boundary in some ways?
Yeah, I do. I think that treating the edge with like care is important to me, especially like the edge of works where like I kind of have like either a banner or a border, or sometimes I just leave it really rough with like some of the fibers kind of coming off. I think that's all a part of the work or the energy of the work. And maybe that's it trying to kind of expand out or like reach out further beyond like the edge of the work. Yeah, painting is funny because like you start talking about it like it's a living being and like it's morphing and moving.
I mean, in the sense of your banners, is that part of it? Like, is the movement that comes with like a gust of wind or like a person walking past it, briskly enough to move
Yeah.
it? Is that part of it for you? Do you think that as part of the concept or meaning or story with it?
I think so. Yeah. I like the way that it interacts with the space and like it's not I guess it brings the works back to earth because they're not a perfect object. Like they're things that are earthly. So I think kind of giving it sort of a more like I respect the work on the wall, but also like it humbles it in some ways, which I don't know. I like it to be accessible, and that feels accessible to me, where it shifts and moves like a human body, like with like the breath of like the air and stuff.
Nice. I observed in the imagery of some of your works, or like it seems like a theme that emerges of water and fire in some ways. Am I seeing things that aren't there? Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, I love like natural elements. So like at first I used to avoid using fire because my name is Phoenix. So
I didn't
always
even make that connection, but
oh
I see
great.
that.
Okay.
Okay.
Love that. Thank you. Because that just firmed up something inside of me. But like I appreciate that because like I've always avoided fire because I didn't want it to seem like corny because I'm like, okay, you're a bird and you're fiery. But then also like I think about water a lot because I grew up next to like the river, like the Ohio River, which is a really funky river. But we can always come to it again and again for like peace. Like that's where we go to walk. And like just how people come up here to go to the lake. So like those two things, and I feel like fire is like purifying and it burns things and kind of symbolizes rebirth, and it also is destructive too. And it also like cleanses things. So like there's like so many symbols elements have a lot in common. They just have a different approach of like doing things.
Do you consider that element of air in an image, like in a canvas or like in a painting? Because hearing you talk about the banner and the movement, it's present there, but in the, I don't know, it's not like you can see it.
Yeah.
It's not like you can like draw it or paint it necessarily. Is that something you consider when you make your works?
Yeah.
Like the air?
Well, I was thinking about this recently, and I think air for me, because I'm an air sign, I'm like, maybe I'm just the air making the work. Like, is that like awkward or weird? Because, I'm bringing the air energy, but then also you can assume like, there's an atmosphere. So the atmosphere is full of like, we assume that there's air moving around in there and there's oxygen. But yeah, I think of myself as a painter, the person who's making the paintings as the air portion. And maybe that's how things are balanced. That's like something I'm trying to explore.
That's interesting. I feel like a lot of people come at their practice, well, everybody does, as an artist in a unique way. Do you feel like that positionality in terms of the energy you bring and what the painting means to you, is that something you learned through a traditional academic, art school education? Is that something that you feel like you had to come to on your own? At what point did that you were talking about abstraction to more, representational, symbolic work. How did that emerge? How did you get to that maturity in your making where you can consider those factors and confidently craft them into your work or consider it in your work?
Yeah. It took a while. I think I came into it on my own. And I think of like painting like academically, like in school, I think of like just the face value of the work, but necessarily the symbols. And I think it just took like a lot of reading to get there. I love reading fiction. Okay. And sometimes like in fiction stories, especially things that are like of like a fantasy genre, like there's always symbols or like objects of significance or something imbued with some sort of power. So I've always liked like what those represent and how they reflect upon the characters. So like I myself kind of become like a character when I'm painting because I'm like, okay, these are the things that I'm finding sacred and it's in this painting and they all kind of point back towards me. So I have to be okay with what I'm putting on the surface because like it has to make sense. But yeah, I think it just took a lot of time of reading and then learning about other artists who do similar things. And that's kind of always been something I've been interested in because there's not a lot of like artists I found that are interested in a little bit of spirituality, but also painting abstractly, but then also kind of thinking about like more, how do you say it? Like figures that aren't like very humanistic. They're more, cartoony. Like that's kind of a different specific way of painting as well. That's difficult to find.
Yeah. In some of my personal work, I've been grappling with that idea too of like where that interplay can exist between all those factors and what kind of honors it without distracting from it or pointing towards something else. Like cartoony is a really good way to put it, because sometimes you get too removed from X, Y, or Z things that are considered profound, right? To get to a point.
Yeah.
So thinking of young artists, early artists, mainly youth, I would say, there can be some preciousness around your work. I don't know if you ever had that. I'm speaking personally and from some of the kids I've worked with, but you know, this is my painting, don't touch it, or this is too important or special to me, so like I can never recreate it. You know, where does that lie for you as a mature practicing artist who feels and imbues their work with that sacredity, with that sensitivity? Do you ever grapple with that? Do you ever think like, this one means too much, it's got too much of my energy, I could never sell it, I could never share it, or that sort of thing? Or have you come to terms with those sorts of things? How does that factor into the commercial aspects of art making?
Right. I think I've come to terms with it finally. It took a long time to get there, but I think at first, when I first started my time in like undergrad, I was very sacred with the objects, and I thought that I was going to be an illustration at some point. But once I learned that, no, you make things for other people to like use, like you license it out, I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel right to me. So like, so eventually I switched to like NSP and started painting. But I think the first time I realized that I can let an artwork go was when I was on a residency. I went to Yale Norfolk and I made a really big painting and I couldn't take it home with me. And I would talk to one of the TAs there, and she's a sculptor. And I would like, what do I do? I made a big painting. I can't get it home. I was like in the middle of Connecticut. I need to ship it to my grandma's house in Ohio. And she was like, you know, sometimes you just got to throw stuff away. You know, if you're not attached to it, it's okay to let it go, because you got the idea out and you'll always have it with you. Sure. And then you have to be okay with letting the thing go. And she was just describing her experiences because she makes sculptures that, you know, you reuse the materials or you deconstruct it and put it together. Like she was working with like a lot of steel. So that's like precious material. So that made a lot of sense. So once I let the painting go, I took a picture of it and I threw it away, and I don't miss it.
Okay.
I don't miss it. So ever since then, I've been okay with like letting things come and go.
Where do you think it ended up? Like, did it go straight to a dumpster to the landfill? Did you destroy it? Does somebody have it out there in Connecticut hanging up somewhere?
Well, maybe. I definitely put it in a big dumpster when we were cleaning our studios out. So I'm pretty sure she probably is in a landfill, which maybe isn't quite responsible because I'm not sure how that paint reacts with like the ground. But lesson learned.
Some future society might excavate and find it and have a lot of questions.
They might. Yeah. I've thrown other paintings away that were on like cardboard because like, you know, cardboard isn't like archival. So all it was going to do was turn everything yellow, and I didn't have a place to store it. Usually it's storage. Like I end up throwing things away because of storage, but I haven't thrown anything away in a long time.
Okay. Good planning on your part then, right?
Yeah, I'm getting better at that.
Don't make it too big.
Yeah.
So speaking about like young artists and kind of finding that pathway, so illustration is like an interesting thought, you know. What determination, other than like the sharing of it, the licensing of it, the kind of like, I would say, removing the agency maybe from yourself of where it ends up or how it gets used, and that's not a good characterization, please feel free to correct that, what other things made that determination from you? Like, do you feel like you're still illustrating in the same way you would, or as a painter, do you feel like you're still getting that illustrative side of you out? Or do you feel like there are other factors that are removing you from illustration? Or I guess, yeah. Does that make sense?
No, totally. It still feels like a little bit like illustration to me because I still love drawing like small scale. So some of the drawings I make are a lot more illustrative than compared to like paintings that are more like expressive and kind of more not vague, but more like conceptual. And I think for me, what the difference is in my work with like an illustration and a painting is that the work, of course, it has like a lot of texture and build up like physically, but then also like it's not the subject that's in the front isn't the main subject. Usually it's something else looming in the background. So there's like layers to like the narrative that are going on. And maybe there's something in the background or in like deep space that's kind of ominous or kind of odd, or you're not sure how to make it out. It's just kind of balancing it around. But I think instead of like painting things that are just like, this is a star in the middle of a painting and that's the painting, usually like maybe this is a star, but then maybe there's something else in the back that's kind of carrying like a more significant undertone underneath it. That's just not the only subject matter. So, there's layers to like understand the work. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
And I think another thing I'm wondering too is you said you read a lot of fiction, you read a lot of like, I don't know, fantasy, sci-fi, or
Yeah.
I think I'm reading into that.
Yeah.
Thinking about the like magical powers within something, right?
Mhm.
Was that kind of was that the directive for going into illustration? Was you wanted to, illustrate the books that you're reading or similar material?
Yeah, I used to write a lot of short stories and stuff when I was younger. So that was a hobby I shared with a friend. So we would like read each other's stories and write and then swap and then cook each other for like having bad grammar and then rotate them back. And we would like draw images with like the narratives we were making and we'd post it on the internet when like blogging was still kind of cool. So so I have like artwork that's floating around on the internet under a username. Good luck finding it. But it's out there. But yeah, so that's kind of how it started, and then I kind of got into making like backgrounds. Like I was really focusing in high school on like the backdrops of paintings, but not necessarily like the subject matter. So I think to this day I still carry that with me. Like I put a lot of emphasis on the backgrounds of images, but yeah, it's just kind of learning how to flesh it out a little bit more and more in the foreground.
Okay. Another technical kind of side of things with your painting, you were talking about the cartoony side, the figuration. How much does observational practice, or did it or does it not, play into your work? For instance, in this piece that we have behind us, the hands, right? Like, is that something that you get informed by observing actual hands, rendering them naturalistically, realistically? Is it something that you feel like that practice distracts you from the images you're making and the messages you're sending with the way you render?
Yeah, it definitely comes from memory a lot of the times, but for this painting, like I got the ballpark in there because I'm like, okay, I remember how two hands look when they collapse together, but then I had to make my hands come together and look at it for like a little bit, and I'm like, okay, now I got to remember this really quick, and then go do it really quick because I couldn't like take a picture of my hands while they're both shut together. So that was a little bit of like a little problematic in the studio, but yeah, I think just doing a lot of observational drawing has kind of given me a lot of confidence and just going for it and remembering that paint isn't permanent. Like it's very malleable because I work in acrylic and that stuff dries so quickly. But, once it's dry, you can just paint over it and erase it and start over again in like a different color. So I usually just draw right on the canvas. And then if something doesn't work, I just put an X through it and use a different color to correct it and move on and hope I don't accidentally go back and use the old line.
That's interesting because that kind of speaks to that process of memory and returning, to validate, to verify kind of like the accuracy or the self-gaslighting, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting to see that kind of happen on a canvas.
Right. Yeah.
That's really cool. So thank you for describing that too, because I know that's,
totally.
I feel like for some people there's this aspiration towards, drawing a certain way, painting a certain way. And sometimes that informs, sometimes that distracts, sometimes that damages in some ways.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of curious, as somebody who has made that choice to render in a certain way, what value you may see in that or not. So
Totally. Yeah. It takes time for sure.
So I did have another question for you specifically that I really wanted to get to, and I think I may have forgotten it. Oh, okay.
Sorry. Nice.
Have to consult the notes.
Yeah.
I haven't asked like any of the questions that I hadn't planned.
Okay.
Kind of boilerplate. But when it comes to shifting those roles from painter to curator, do you find yourself seeing other people's works through your own lens? What type of preparation or process or mindset or toolbox do you keep to kind of allow yourself to see other people's work with the same authenticity and clarity that you bring in your own work?
Oh, like kind of not muddy it with like my own understanding of my own work and kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, that's tricky. It's tricky too, like kind of like checking yourself because I do that often. I'm like, okay, do I like this work because it reminds me of something I would make, or do I like it because of like the value that it brings? And sometimes I do. I'm like, no, I like this painting because I like it selfishly because it looks great and I want to paint like this person. So like I have to like compartmentalize and put it away until maybe a time where it's like actually important to bring that person's work to the forefront in whatever project I'm working on, just to kind of be like, it's ethical. Like you don't want to have like an abuse of power either. So I try to like serve communities that I'm working within rather than like my own selfish like desires of what I want to see, because that's not always what it's about. It's not always about the curator. It's about helping the artist and then also making sure communities see themselves on the walls as well. So yeah, so that's kind of like where I try to draw the line. But if I see an artist that while I'm working and they just so happen to be kind of cool, I'll just like, bookmark it for later, take it home and check it out when I have some time.
That's cool. And so it sounds like you're building that ethical framework in a way that's relative to the communities or to the nature of the exhibition or the show. How do you connect with community? How do you enter into an idea or a group of people and pull out those threads that you feel like would help them see themselves? Am I characterizing that in the right way?
No, totally. So, I mean, first is just observation. Like, what's the context of like where you are currently? Like, who's walking down the street? So, like, and after that, then you need to actually go outside and walk down the street and meet people and hear what they're interested in, and also kind of check out what businesses are around too, because that's really important. Like, people are working and thriving in this area, and like, you want to know like how can you contribute to that, that nature. And then also when guests come through the door, we often ask like, how'd you hear about us? Or like, what do you like about the exhibition? And just kind of ask them like, just brief questions. You don't want to mine them for information because that's kind of really awkward. But, you just have to listen to people when they say something makes them uncomfortable or something like really like inspires them. And then you take that, that info and say like, okay, vast majority of people around here kind of like this. So like, how could we spin this in a way that's kind of looped into like arts and maybe a little bit of education, and just kind of going from there. It's like a very organic process, and also just programs too. Like people come and visit programs, and you could tell if a lot of people come to this program, maybe that's something they want to see more often. But if they don't come too much to this program, maybe that's not in the bag. Maybe we got to think of something else that's not really serving anyone. So, it's kind of a little bit of trial and error and just being okay with making mistakes too.
That was also going to be the follow-up then. Is there a moment where you feel like you made a mistake in that process of bringing something in to connect with an audience that doesn't connect with it? And would you mind sharing that and kind of what you pulled from it?
Yeah, actually, I don't think I've had that happen, at least not yet. I'm not ruling it out, but I've definitely seen programs that I haven't done, but like, like peers have done. And then, they're just like low turnout, or it's just kind of like a disagreement with folks about like what the actual function of the program is. It's so hard to be vague, but yeah, there's definitely situations like that. But thankfully I haven't faced anything where it was like so out of left field where people are like up in arms about it. And that's like the tough part, because like when you produce culture, you have to put it out into the world, or like, bring different cultural things together and put it out in the world. And people do respond to it, and you have to be ready for it no matter what, whatever, no matter what you think of it, how great you think it is.
Sure. It's interesting that you say that too, because thinking about the value people tend to place on arts, or maybe lack of value in some regards, but when it's something that's offensive, something that doesn't sit right, people let you know in far greater numbers than they would admit that it's valuable to them.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So you've had good success. You've kind of gone through different routes. Can you tell us a little bit about like what you're up to now, kind of where you are and how you came to find where you are?
Yeah, I guess like maybe more like in the studio, or like,
all of it, I would say.
All of it? Okay.
Because I'm kind of curious to like how those things come together for you in unison. So to give a little context, some people I've known have had like, the paid professional roles in the arts, but find that it somehow saps their energy from being
Right.
creative themselves. And in order to keep their studio practices alive and creative, they've taken themselves out of those roles and work outside the arts, right? And there's no right answer for anyone, but for you personally, where have you gone? Where have you found that balance? And kind of like tell us a little bit about where you are now and how you're feeling about it.
Yeah, so I am able to like preserve a little bit of creativity for myself. And it's mostly through like working at home, surprising. Like I have a studio, it's in Bayview, but then I also kind of give myself avenues to make work that's smaller in my house. So then I don't, and like, when you get the urge to like make a thing or you have an idea, there's materials aren't far away. So that's super helpful. But yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out, honestly. And yeah, I wish I had more to report on like how that's going. But yeah, I think I'm also just early in my career too, so I'm trying to figure it out.
So that is another question that I like to ask people too. It's like, what are some dream projects, or maybe it's not a project, but it's a trajectory or anything you want to be, and like dream big, like this could be, you want to paint the surface of the moon or something like that.
Yeah. Wow, I don't think anybody's really asked me that question before. That's really interesting. I mean, everybody loves the fantasy of being an artist full time in like painting, but this is not the Renaissance, so we have to
That
accept.
it is not.
No, it is not. So complete opposite time. But I think a dream of mine is being able to make paintings and then kind of, have income from that. That would be great. And then also like taking on work that I am excited to do. Like curatorial is exciting for me. So like if I wanted to go on a whim and like travel and do like curatorial projects in different places, that would be really fun while also painting at the same time. But I also love my job right now. So like I'm comfortable where I am at the moment. But yeah, I think anything relating to travel and moving around and being creative is like kind of a big dream for me.
So given the choice, would you want to curate art on a cruise ship?
Oh no.
Going back to that. Port of Milwaukee's got some new ones coming in, right?
Oh no. Okay.
That ship has sailed.
The ship has sailed. Oh my God, I couldn't imagine like the comments of getting some bad paintings up on the wall and somebody complaining about it. That's a whole different kind of community that I don't think I want to be invested in. I will say.
Thank you for entertaining a silly question.
Yeah.
So we do have a few more moments before we wrap up.
Okay.
So is there anything that you weren't asked over the course of this discussion that you wish you were asked?
You were kind of hitting all the good questions. Actually, you were asking me questions that I've never been asked before. So like you're a great facilitator.
I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, no, you're great. No, actually I don't. I feel very satisfied with this conversation. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And then wondering, we may have some questions in the audience or questions on our live stream. So does anyone have anything they'd like to share, to talk, to ask of our guests while they're here?
Yes.
Yeah.
According to your painting here, I love how the outside border kind of matches the stars, and I like how the paint outlining the stars matches the border. But
Thank you.
when you were painting like the skyline, what skyline were you thinking of? Were you thinking of home? Here, or were you just captured into like a skyline with that type of hue?
Yeah. So the question was about like asking where the skyline came from in this painting that's behind us. And the skyline I was thinking about is actually Cincinnati, because down there, when you're coming up through Kentucky and going towards Ohio, there's this area called the Cut in the Hill. And it literally looks like there's a cut in the hill where they put the highway, but then as you're coming up, you can see the city skyline between like the rolling hills. So sometimes I reference that area a lot because I think it's like a gorgeous sight, especially in the evening. But it's definitely abstracted because like the sun doesn't hang over this in real life like that. So it's kind of becoming like a bit of a fantasy, like kind of romanticizing it. But yeah, I was thinking of home this time. Yeah.
Anyone else? Do we have any on the live stream? All right. Well, the nice thing is we do record these and present them out on YouTube. So if anyone has questions that they want to reach out and ask, and in terms of some shameless self-promotion, how could people get a hold of you, find your work? Where will you be at, or virtually, in person? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, yeah, people can reach me on my website. I have like a question thing, a contact me thing. But also, you can also email me, phoenixsbrownart@gmail.com. And I also have an Instagram. It's Phoenix is Phoenix is Phoenix. I share a name with Mel B's daughter. Her name is also Phoenix Brown. And her handle is Phoenix is Phoenix. So I just added an extra Phoenix. But I came first. I was the first Phoenix Brown. But
Do you mind sharing that in my mic?
oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah, my handle is Phoenix is Phoenix is Phoenix. Great.
Do you mind sharing the rest of the story too?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yes. So, oh no, that sucks. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I share a name with Mel B from the Spice Girls. Her daughter's name is also Phoenix Brown. So her handle is Phoenix, and mine is Phoenix is Phoenix is Phoenix. I just added an extra Phoenix just so people know. But I wonder if she ever noticed that I did that. I'm sure people maybe have seen it if they're looking her up. So I don't know. It's like an inside joke that I have, and I hope the other Phoenix maybe acknowledges it one day. But yeah.
And then website?
Oh, my website is oh boy, this is like a quiz. I'm pretty sure it's phoenixbrownart.com. I feel bad that I don't know it off the top of my head.
I've gotten there. Phoenix Brown Milwaukee search.
Yep, Google. Yep. That's it. Yep.
Ask questions.
Yeah, yep, people can ask questions there anytime. Sweet.
I'll trade you again. Well, thank you. As long as there's no other questions, we'll be sticking around for a little informal discussion, if you don't mind. But I just want to thank you for sharing so much of your work and your practice. And I think, there's, as we state every time, there's so many pathways and opportunities in the arts. And sometimes it's a matter of like getting to know what's out there, but also connecting with the right people to help set that course, to guide that path, right? And we all come at it such different ways. So, from illustrator to painter to curator and all in between. Who knows? You might illustrate stuff in the near future, right?
Yeah.
You never know where life takes you. So by building community here through discussion, by having these records virtually, hopefully people can kind of learn about what is out there, what might fit themselves.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing the personal aspects of your work through your paintings, but also through your practice and process, and sharing that out with us here. I do want to invite everybody back. We're going to be taking a little break for Paint It Forward, but we'll be back August 11th, where we'll be talking with a group of college art school professionals and art program professionals. So you can, for our young people, can learn a little bit more about those pathways, but also talking about other opportunities for employment in the arts. That'll coincide with our Rising Artists Council teen program exhibition. So if you come out that day, you can see some art, you can hear about pathways to take, and we'll also be live streaming that too. And then coming up more soon, on June 27th, we will have our last 43rd Invalid of the season. So it's like an open house setting with all the businesses in our intersection. You can come out, hang out, see what's up, make some art, do some cool things. More information we found on artistworkingeducation.org. So Phoenix, thank you again. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to the Milwaukee Arts Board for funding this, and for Washington Park Media Center for hosting us, and for Mars for this awesome setting that we got to communicate in today. So
Yeah,
we'll see you all next time.
Great. Thank you.